You can know that you need to have boundaries and yet still struggle to stick to them. You can even be clear on what you want to say about a boundary and still find yourself saying yes, staying quiet, or over explaining until your boundary basically disappears. If that's you, it's probably not because you don't have the right words. Most of the time, it's because holding a boundary requires you to face emotional discomfort that you've learned to avoid. By the way, that's totally normal and common. Hey there, my name is Amy Shield. I help smart, capable women feel as confident on the inside as they look on the outside. And today I'm going to be talking all about boundaries, discomfort, and self trust, and the hidden reason why you keep saying yes when you actually want to say no. Avoiding emotional discomfort when boundaries come up can be especially true if you're someone who's spent a long time managing other people's disappointment, frustration, or awkwardness. In other words, managing other people's emotions, or at least trying to. In the moment, it can feel easier to just smooth things over by disregarding your boundary than it is to risk someone else being unhappy with you. Over time, though, that turns into resentment and exhaustion and a relationship with yourself that doesn't exactly feel solid. In today's video, you'll learn why you keep saying yes when you want to say no, what's actually happening the moment that your boundaries collapse, and how to start holding boundaries in a way that's rooted in love, not in anger or frustration or resentment or spite. Let's talk about what a boundary collapse actually looks like in real life. Boundary collapse is what happens when you know what you want to do, but you can't seem to follow through. Boundary collapse often looks something like this. Maybe you feel that internal, clear, no, I don't want to say yes to that, but you end up saying yes anyway. Maybe you stay quiet and hope that the situation just resolves itself, or maybe you start to set a boundary, but then you soften it or negotiate it or over explain it until it stops being a boundary. Maybe you agree to do it just this once and then you end up feeling resentful later, or maybe you take responsibility for somebody else's feelings and try to keep them emotionally comfortable, even if it costs you your emotional discomfort or your bandwidth. If any of those sound familiar, it doesn't mean you're weak. It usually means that your nervous system and your self trust are getting involved on the same playing field at the same time. All right, let's talk about the real reason you keep saying yes. So, a lot of the time, what you're really avoiding are the feelings you believe will come with saying no or enforcing a boundary. Might be feelings like guilt or fear of rejection or fear of being judged or misunderstood, or the discomfort you feel when you believe someone else is disappointed or sad or struggling. If someone's upset with you, you might feel a pull to fix it. You might feel like it's your job, your responsibility to fix it. If someone is disappointed, you might assume you've done something wrong. If someone's frustrated, you might feel responsible for their emotional experience. So you violate your own boundary to avoid the emotional discomfort you expect that you'll feel when somebody else is unhappy. That's why the advice to just communicate your boundaries better usually doesn't work in terms of actually sticking to your boundaries. The issue is not just your vocabulary or saying the right words or having some boundary scripts in your back pocket. The issue is your ability to stay aligned with yourself while you're experiencing the uncomfortable emotions that come with setting and maintaining boundaries. Boundaries work best when they come from love. When boundaries are discussed online, sometimes they're framed as a scorched earth shift or an ultimatum or retaliatory actions toward other people. Sometimes they're framed as a way to teach someone a lesson. That's not what I'm talking about when I refer to boundaries. Boundaries work best when they're rooted in love and respect for yourself and the other person. A boundary is not punishment. It's honesty. A loving boundary says something like, I'm going to be honest about my limits so I don't build resentment. I'm going to take responsibility for what I can actually do, or I'm going to let you be responsible for your response to my answer to this question or request. When you set boundaries from love, you're not trying to control other people. You're trying to show up with integrity. Let's talk about who is driving the bus when you cave. If you've heard me talk before about your security guard, this is one of the most important places to apply that security guard lens. Right before you cave, pause and ask yourself, who's driving the bus right now? When your thinking brain that is aligned with your values and your self trust is driving, that internal voice usually sounds something like, I can be kind and still say no, or it's okay for me to disappoint someone, or I'm allowed to have limits, or I can tolerate the discomfort and stay aligned. When your security guard is driving, that voice sounds something like, if they're disappointed in me, I'm unsafe, or if they're upset, I have to fix it. Or if I say no, they'll think I'm selfish. Or if I set this boundary, something bad will happen. This is not about shaming your security guard, who, by the way, is trying her best to protect you in ways that you don't really need her to protect you. Instead, it's about recognizing what's happening early enough to choose a different response. By the way, when we're talking about setting and enforcing boundaries, biological responses matter too. So when your security guard sounds the alarm, you might feel it physically. You may notice something like a change in your heart rate or a tightness in your chest, maybe even a knot in your stomach. You might feel shaky or hot or numb or like your mind is going blank. Maybe you feel a sudden urge to talk fast or over explain or backtrack in the conversation. All of that is totally normal. It doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. It means your nervous system is reacting to what it perceives as a threat, even if the threat is simply somebody being disappointed in you, which, when we really think about it, isn't a very big threat at all. If your security guard sounds the alarm and triggers biological responses like these, it can be a struggle to hold your boundaries. And that's because your thinking brain largely goes offline and your fight, flight, or freeze response can take over as a result. Now, if you'd like some support for what to do when your body reacts like this so that you can soothe your nervous system and bring that thinking brain back online, I'll link to another video that's all about practicing calm and soothing your nervous system so that you can get that thinking brain back online and move forward with self-confidence. Next, let's talk about discomfort tolerance for stronger boundaries, or what I like to call resilient discomfort. Holding boundaries requires some discomfort tolerance. That means that you're willing to feel some uncomfortable emotions that you'd probably rather avoid without using saying yes as an in the moment kind of escape hatch. I call this resilient discomfort. Resilient discomfort is really an emotional state where you're willing to face and press into emotional discomfort because you recognize that it's working for your greater good over time. And often, it even supports the other person's long-term growth as well. Resilient discomfort is the moment you make this decision. Yes, this is uncomfortable. And not all discomfort is bad. And this discomfort is part of building self-trust. And it's working for my greater long-term well-being. This is one of the building blocks of lasting, sustainable self-confidence. And it's also a skill that you can build. It's not your job to save everyone and everything. This is one of the hardest mindset shifts for people who struggle with boundaries, people like me who are heart-centered. If you're always stepping in, always rescuing, accommodating, smoothing, soothing, fixing, and carrying, it can start to feel like it's your job to keep everything running. Newsflash, it isn't. It's okay to disappoint people, to decline to help, to let the other person figure out another solution that doesn't involve you violating your boundary. And here's the easy part to miss. When you always say yes, you often block growth. You block your own growth because you don't get the chance to build resilient discomfort and self-trust. You also end up filling your time, energy, and your bandwidth with more tasks, more commitments, and more obligations than you can really handle. That means less time for your own meaningful development and contributions to the world. You also block the other person's growth because they don't get the chance to problem solve, get creative, make decisions, or learn what they're capable of without leaning on you as the default solution. Sometimes, no is exactly what creates space for someone else to step up and have their own transformation. Let's talk about what it looks like to set and hold boundaries from love. Boundaries get easier when you can picture how they work in real life. Here are three common scenarios. How about a volunteer role that you don't really have the bandwidth for? Let's say someone asks you to take on a volunteer role or a volunteer task. It's a good cause, you care about it, and you like the people, and you also know that you truly don't have the time or the bandwidth to fill it well. This is where boundary collapse often happens. You don't want to disappoint anyone. You don't want them to think that you're not committed, and you don't want the organization or the person to struggle. You don't want to feel guilty. So you end up saying yes, even though you know it's probably not a good idea. If you want to hold a loving boundary in this kind of situation, start with what you know about your capacity and your limits. A loving boundary might sound something like, "Thanks for thinking of me. I'm not able to take that on right now." You can add a small supportive line as well if it's true, such as, "Even though I'm not able to help, I hope that you find someone who can." Then comes our friend resilient discomfort. You might feel guilty or worried that they're going to judge you. You might feel a pull to explain yourself until the guilt goes away or the other party agrees that, yeah, you shouldn't take this on. This is your moment to notice who is driving the bus. If your security guard is driving, you'll probably feel a need to smooth it over, backtrack, or offer a weaker yes. In other words, violate your boundary. If your thinking brain is driving, maybe you'll remind yourself of something like, "I can be a good person and still have limits." By the way, if your security guard is driving, you have permission to take a moment to soothe her through some nervous system regulation to get that thinking brain back online so you can respond with self confidence. How about another example? Let's say a request from a family member. Maybe a family member asks you for time or help or emotional or financial support or a favor. Maybe it's a reasonable request and maybe it's not. Either way, in this scenario, you know that you don't have the capacity to do what they're asking right now. If you have a family system where guilt and obligation are common, you may feel an immediate pressure to comply and say yes. You might hear an old internal story that says you have to do this, even when you don't. A loving boundary might sound like, "I can't do that, I'm sorry." Or if it feels more natural in your family dynamic, you could say something like, "Hey, I'm not able to help with that. If you'd like to offer a smaller form of support that's actually true for you, you can, but you don't have to." For example, maybe you say, "I can't take that on, but I have 10 minutes to talk through this with you so you can think of some other options." Only offer something like that if you genuinely want to do it and offer what you can actually follow through on. Otherwise, you're just creating a new version of boundary collapse. Next, as we know, comes resilient discomfort, that discomfort that we feel when we set and enforce a boundary. Maybe you feel guilty or anxious or an urge to over explain so that the other person won't be upset. It is okay to feel guilty or anxious. Those are normal emotional reactions. And you don't have to over explain. You can be kind without over functioning, and you can be loving without rescuing other people. You can let them have their emotional response without making it your job to fix it. How about a third example? Maybe turning down a social invite or the pressure to consume certain food or drink that might come with it. Maybe you get invited to go somewhere and you don't really want to go, or maybe you do want to go, but you don't want to participate in a certain thing, like maybe having a piece of cake when you have a gluten sensitivity or drinking alcohol when you're currently avoiding it. These are everyday moments where people often override their boundaries because they don't want to seem difficult. They don't want to disrupt the vibe. They don't want to be judged or seen as not fun or not participating. A loving boundary might sound like, "Hey, thanks for inviting me. I'm going to stay in tonight, but I hope you have a great time." Or if it's about food, maybe you say something like, "No thanks, gluten doesn't work for me." Or if it's about alcohol, "No thanks, I'm not drinking." Then comes the uncomfortable part, letting the moment be a little awkward if it needs to be. Maybe even letting yourself feel more uncomfortable if the person pushes back and pressures you to join in. Saying something like, "Oh, come on, don't be a shut in," or "Oh, have a piece of cake with me," or No, seriously, have a drink. You'll feel more relaxed. A lot of boundary collapse happens because we try to fill the silence or prevent someone else from feeling uncomfortable, or we struggle to hold our ground when they apply peer pressure. We start over explaining, apologizing, and negotiating our boundary away. Resilient discomfort looks like letting it be simple. You're not responsible for managing everyone else's feelings about your choices. Your decision is made, and they have the right to respond however they want to, but that response is theirs to manage. Here's a simple checkpoint that you can run through before you respond when a boundary comes up. Do I actually have the bandwidth for this? Am I about to say yes so that I can avoid the discomfort of saying no? If I say no and the other person is disappointed, can I let that be okay, even if it's uncomfortable? And who is driving the bus right now? Is it my thinking brain or my security guard? You don't have to answer perfectly. You just have to notice what's happening. Because once you notice it, you can start to choose differently. Here's a grounded next step if you'd like to take this work deeper. Boundaries are not just communication, they're self trust and self confidence in action. If you keep caving, it doesn't mean you're weak. It usually means that you've learned to avoid emotional discomfort and protect connection with other people by keeping other people emotionally comfortable, often at the cost of your own bandwidth, resentment, and your own well being. But here's the thing, you can change that. You can set boundaries from love for yourself and for other people. You can build resilient discomfort. You can learn to stay aligned even when uncomfortable emotions arise, even when your security guard sounds her alarm, and even when somebody else is upset or disappointed because you've set and enforced a boundary. And when you do, you don't just get better boundaries. You get a stronger relationship with yourself and often with other people. If you'd like some help with identifying your specific boundary collapse pattern and practicing the skills that will help you hold boundaries without resentment, I'd love to invite you to schedule a free coaching consultation. We'll talk about what's happening for you, the changes that you'd like to make, and how I might be able to help you get there. My name is Amy Shield. I help smart, capable women feel as confident on the inside as they look on the outside. Thank you so much for checking out my video today. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.